In today's video, I'll be sharing what I eat in a week as a Greek living in the UK. I like to cook mostly Greek dishes as that's my way of bringing a bit of sunny Greece in rainy England, but I also love a nice and cozy British meal. Let's get started. For breakfast, we're starting with one of my go-tos, KAYANA, aka scrambled eggs with tomato and feta. I'm starting by grating a few tomatoes and adding them in a little bowl. I also chop all the skin that gets left behind as I don't like to waste them. I then chopped the roasted pepper in small pieces and added it to the same bowl. I grabbed a non-stick pan and added a bit of olive oil in it. I then added the tomato and pepper mixture and stirred. I seasoned with salt and pepper and paprika and gave it another mix. While the tomato is cooking, I cracked 2 eggs in a bowl and whisked them well. Once the tomato doesn't release any more liquid, I added my eggs and mixed everything well until the egg is cooked through. I also love to have a pita on the side, so I'm toasting a wholemeal one to have with my breakfast. I served my KAYANA in a bowl and topped with some feta. I then served the pita on the side and breakfast is ready. So quick to make and the tomato makes it so fresh and summery. It's really one of my favorite Greek breakfasts. If you haven't tried it, give it a go and let me know how you like it. And I like to take my time enjoying breakfast, even though I love to eat and watch Netflix too. I've recently been trying to eat without distractions so I can fully enjoy my meal, and you can really notice the difference with how much you're noticing the different flavors and textures. For lunch, I thought I'd make a SPANAKOPITA, so I'm grabbing all the veggies that I'll need from the fridge. We'll be using leeks, mint, dill, spinach of course, and for cheese, a blend of ricotta and feta. And yes, of course, feta is my favorite cheese, as you can tell. I started by chopping the spring onions in small pieces. I then sliced the leek in 2 and cut it in small pieces as well. I added the vegetables in a bowl and washed my herbs well. I then chopped them up in small pieces and laid them on the side. I grabbed a big saucepan and added some olive oil. Once the oil was hot, I added the leek and spring onions and let them cook for a few minutes. I then added a few bags of spinach and let it wilt. I seasoned with salt and pepper, and finally I added the herbs. I let it cook for a few minutes and then I grabbed a big bowl and put a sieve on top. I added the spinach mixture and pressed it as much as I could to get rid of the excess water. I let it on the side to strain while I was making my filo. To a big bowl I added all-purpose flour, salt, white wine vinegar, olive oil and water. I brought the dough together with my hands and then emptied it in a floured surface to knead for a few minutes. I also thought that the dough seemed like it needed a bit more olive oil, so I added a bit and kneaded it again until the dough was nice and smooth. I divided the dough in 2 and then I grabbed my thin rolling pin. I started rolling out my filo by rolling the dough in and then with a fast motion opening it up as I'm showing on the video here. I then opened the second filo and laid it on the side ready to use. Now the spinach mixture had released all of the excess water, so I put it in a new bowl and added the feta and ricotta. If you can find danthotiro instead of ricotta, that's even better, but I didn't have any, so I settled for ricotta. I gave it a good mix to make sure the cheese and spinach are combined well. I then grabbed a baking dish, added some olive oil and spread it around with my hands. I added the first filo on the bottom and pushed it out so it can be as even as possible. I then added the spinach mixture, evened it out with the back of my spoon and then topped it with the filo on top. I sealed it all around and then added lots of olive oil on top. Then made some marks where we will be cutting the pita later, but it also helps with releasing some of the steam while it's cooking. I placed it in a preheated oven to bake for about an hour. And now our SPANAKOPITA is ready, so I'm cutting myself a big piece and serving on my plate to enjoy for lunch. Let's have a bite. It's good. The herbs make such a big difference, and I think it's the first time I've put mint in. Definitely recommend. So fragrant, so tasty, so hot, but it's too good. Oh, so hot. So good, so good. And then for dinner we had some friends over, so I decided to make some meze, so I'm starting by making some tzatziki. I started by grating half a cucumber and adding it to a strainer that I put on top of a bowl to get rid of the excess water. I then squeezed the cucumber to get rid of the water and let it on the side for 10 to 15 minutes. Meanwhile, I chopped a small bunch of dill and let it on the side. And for yogurt, I'm using some full-fat Greek yogurt as it's so creamy and delicious. I added it in a bowl and then added the dill and a crushed garlic clove. I also added a bit of olive oil, vinegar and seasoned with salt. I then added the cucumber and gave it a good mix. All the recipes will be in the description below, by the way, so you can find the exact measurements there. Taste test. Oh my god, the camera is so dirty. And I'll clean you in a second. Oh my god, it's so good. I keep forgetting, I say it on every video I think, but full-fat Greek yogurt is so superior. Also the Tesco one, so good. I think it's cheaper than the Faya one. Shouldn't say that because Faya is a Greek brand, but it's very good. Might be even better. My brother thought it was exactly the same as Faya, but it's Tesco Finest. Very good. I smoothed out the tzatziki and topped it with a Kalamata olive, and it's ready to serve. Next up, we're making one of my dad's specials, roasted aubergines with parsley and garlic. To begin, I started by cutting 3 aubergines in circles about this thick. It's important to get all the pieces to be of similar size so they can roast evenly, but to be honest, always get some random thick and thin pieces. I placed all the aubergine pieces in a baking pan lined with baking paper and added lots of olive oil. I seasoned with salt and pepper and tossed the aubergines around so they can get coated in oil. I placed it in a preheated oven for about half an hour or until the aubergines are fully cooked. Halfway through cooking, I also like to turn them and add more oil if they need it. And then back in the oven they go to finish. After half hour, my aubergines were ready, so I took them out of the oven and look how perfect they look. I arranged them all in my serving dish, and next up we're going to be making the topping, which makes all the difference in transforming this dish to a delicious side dish. To make it, I crushed a couple of garlic cloves and chopped them up in small pieces. I added the garlic in a small bowl, and then I washed a bunch of parsley and chopped it up as well. I added it to the same dish and I topped it with some vinegar. I only had white vinegar, but red wine works so much better. I gave it a good mix and then topped the aubergines with a mixture. This is such a simple dish, but it's honestly so good. It's a hit at every dinner party, you need to make it. And since I had these beautiful tomatoes, I decided to make some mini DAKOS, so I'm starting by chopping all the tomatoes and adding them in a little bowl. I then grabbed my serving dish and added the rusks on top. By the way, these are my homemade rusks, which were so delicious. You can find the recipe on my previous video where I cooked a bunch of ancient Greek recipes. I'll have it linked in the description below. I seasoned the tomatoes with salt, added some vinegar and olive oil and gave it a good mix. I then topped the rusks with the tomatoes. I added a few capers and of course crumbled up some feta on top. I finished it with a big pinch of oregano and our DAKOS salad is ready. This is such a nice alternative to a Greek salad and it was so delicious with the homemade rusks. And since I had made SPANAKOPITA, I'm also serving a few pieces as it's another good mezze dish. I'm also serving some pitas to have on the side. And for our meat, we will be using chicken thigh, as I'm sure you all know by now how much I love chicken. I started by emptying the thigh fillets in a big bowl. I seasoned with salt, pepper, Italian herbs and some lemon, but you can season with whatever spices you like. I'm also using Greek yogurt to marinate the chicken, as I find that makes it very tender and delicious. I added the lemon juice and some olive oil and mixed it well to make sure the marinade coats all the chicken pieces. I then covered it with some plastic wrap and let it in the fridge to marinate for a few hours. After the chicken has been marinating for a few hours, it's ready to bake in the grill, so I lined the baking dish with some foil and added all the chicken pieces on it. I then put it in the oven to grill for about 30 minutes, but you can check when the chicken is cooked through based on your oven. I then set the table, and I don't know about you, but I love this feeling when you've been cooking for a few hours and it's finally time to set everything on your table ready for your guests. So I served the aubergine, the DAKOS, tzatziki and SPANAKOPITA, and then James arrived with the wine, so as you can see, Elsie was so excited with his arrival. Lastly, I added the chicken and of course some lemon slices, as no meal is complete without a squeeze of lemon on top. So here's the final mezze table. I love making mezze as I love the variety and most of the dishes are so fresh, you feel so good after having it. It's the next day and I'm having a lazy morning, and there's nothing better than having leftovers for breakfast, so I'm cutting a piece of my SPANAKOPITA and warming it up in the oven to have for my breakfast. And while it's warming, I decide to make a freshly squeezed orange juice, so I cut a few oranges and used my juicer to make a juice. I definitely need to get one of those electric juicers, by the way, as my wrist can't take this juicing, it's so painful. Anyways, I served my orange juice and my SPANAKOPITA and breakfast was ready. For lunch, we're making a Sunday Greek classic, pasticcio, which is basically like a Greek lasagna. To make it, I started by peeling a couple of carrots and chopping them up in small pieces. I then did the same with the celery and the onions. I then grabbed a big saucepan and added some olive oil in it. Once it was hot, I added the veggies and stirred them to coat with the olive oil. I seasoned with salt and pepper and then added my minced beef. I stirred everything well to make sure the meat gets some nice color all around. I also added some boiling water in a separate pan to boil my pasta. Traditionally for pasticcio we use some long pasta tubes, but I can never find them in the UK, so I'm just using some rigatoni. And now back to the bolognese. The meat seems like it's gotten a nice color to it and it's not releasing any more water, so I'm adding a bit of tomato paste, some chopped tomatoes and passata. I also added a cinnamon stick and gave it a final stir before letting it stew for an hour or so. And now onto the bechamel. I'm adding equal parts of olive oil and flour to my pan and stirring it well to get rid of any lumps. Lastly, I added the milk and whisked well. I let it thicken up, and when it had my desired consistency, I seasoned with salt and pepper. And now onto the assembly. I started by adding all the pasta at the bottom of the dish. I then topped with the bolognese sauce and tried to spread it evenly. Lastly, I topped with the bechamel sauce and I added some panko breadcrumbs on top. I put it in a preheated oven for about 45 minutes. And of course I was too hungry and couldn't resist a bit of the bechamel sauce and the pasta. And I remember my mom and grandma would always leave some bechamel sauce for me to eat when they would make pasticcio, so it's only right that I continue this tradition. After 45 minutes my pasticcio was ready, and look at this beauty. I cut a big slice and served it on my plate, and lunch was served. So yeah, I was impatient. You have to let the pasticcio sit for a few minutes, like 10-15 minutes, because otherwise it will collapse like how mine did, but it's tasty either way. So yeah, I don't really mind, but if you want to have those layers, just let it rest a bit and it will like settle. The perfect Sunday meal. Oh, wow. Very, very good. Gonna go enjoy. To get some treats because it's Sunday. If I'm honest, I also get treats not on a Sunday, but so I got a vegan carrot cake and a Malteser cookie. This is my selection. I'm gonna share with James. For dinner, I decided to make chicken souvlaki as I had loads of leftovers and I wanted something quick and yummy. I started by cutting a few tomatoes in slices and also a bit of onion, but you can do whatever veggies you like. I usually keep it classy with tomato and onion, but rocket also works well. I then grabbed my leftover chicken and cut a couple of fillets in small pieces so I can warm them up in my pan. I added some olive oil in my non-stick pan and added the chicken to warm through. While the chicken was heating up, I toasted 2 pitas and cut them in half. I filled them with the tzatziki and then my chicken was all warmed up, so I added that in the pita too. I topped with the tomato and onion, and of course I sprinkled some paprika on top for that authentic souvlaki taste. And as you can tell by my dance, I really enjoyed that dinner. The next day I was feeling like I was coming down with a cold, so I started the day with some lemon sip, which was way too sweet for my liking. And of course, after that sickly sweet tea, I had to have a savory breakfast. So I'm cracking 2 eggs in my bowl and adding some egg whites for some extra protein. I added the eggs in my pan, and for my omelette filling I'm doing tomato and roasted pepper. And of course some feta. I seasoned with salt and pepper and did my best to flip it, but this one was a chunky one, so it did break, but it came together after, so it's all good. I served it on my plate and breakfast was ready. Very simple but very filling and delicious. For lunch I had a bit of pasticcio left, and today you can see the layers as it had time to set, so I'm just warming it up in the oven. And I was out of green salad, so I'm just chopping up a bit of cucumber to have on the side, as I feel like no meal is complete without some greens on the side. I just added some vinegar and salt to my cucumber and then served a big piece of pasticcio, and honestly this was so good. I love having leftovers as you get to have a lovely meal with minimum effort, so I always cook in big batches. And my usual treat after lunch today, I'm having some English breakfast tea and a dark chocolate digestive. Let me know in the comments, by the way, what's your favorite biscuit? I'd love to hear your faves. And then for dinner, I thought the soup would make me feel a bit better, so I started by roasting a bunch of tomatoes with some garlic cloves. I added them in my baking dish, seasoned with salt and pepper, and added some olive oil. I then put them in the oven to roast for about 30 minutes. And now that my tomatoes are roasted, I'm chopping my vegetables to cook in the stovetop. I'm doing some onion, leek and celery. So now my vegetables are all chopped up. I added some olive oil to my saucepan and added the onion to saute for a few minutes. I seasoned with salt and pepper and then added the leeks and celery. I let them cook for a few minutes and then added the roasted tomatoes and garlic. For seasoning, I used some Italian style seasoning and paprika. I also added some tomato paste, and to make the soup more filling and add some protein, I added some butter beans. Lastly, I added a can of chopped tomatoes, a veggie stock cube and covered with water. I also then decided to add some herbs de Provence, as I thought it could do with a bit more seasoning. I let it simmer for a few hours on low heat, and when I was ready to serve, I used my immersion blender and blended the soup to a nice smooth consistency. I served a few spoonfuls of the soup and topped with a bit of ricotta, but I think some creme fraiche would work even better. I also toasted a pita to have on the side, and that was dinner. Later on, I got a bit hungry again, so I decided to make some peanut butter and jam toast. I spread about a tablespoon of peanut butter on my rye bread and then topped with this sugar-free raspberry jam that is so delicious. This brand has the best jam as it's not too sweet and they have such a great selection of fruits, but I always go back to the raspberry as it's my favorite and it goes so well with peanut butter. Another day, another egg breakfast. I swear I can never get bored of eggs. I'm peeling a couple of mushrooms and then chopping them in slices. I'm also using a roasted pepper, so I just chopped that in small pieces as well. I added my veggies in my non-stick pan and let them cook through. Oh, and while I was waiting, I had some apple juice. This brand is so good. If you haven't tried it, definitely get some. It's so good. Back to the eggs. I just cracked 2 eggs and added some egg whites, for extra protein and all that, and whisked it well. I then added the egg mixture to my veggies and stirred it around. I also seasoned with salt and pepper and continue to stir to make sure the egg is cooked through. I'm also going to be having some toast, so I'm prepping some avocado and cucumber for my toppings. I cut my toast in 2 and added the avocado in 1/2. I mashed it up, and then for the other half I'm doing some hummus, so I'm just spreading it evenly and then topping with the cucumber slices. This toast combo is my favorite, so good if you like a savory breakfast. I then served my eggs on the side and breakfast was served. For lunch I'm making another souvlaki as I wanted to use up the last of the chicken, so I'm just cutting that up in small pieces and adding them to my pan with some olive oil to warm up. And cooking the chicken like this made it almost like a gyros. It was so good. I then chopped my onion in small pieces and of course some tomatoes. And instead of tzatziki, I decided to make this sauce that usually comes in the chicken souvlaki in Greece, so I'm adding some mayonnaise and Greek yogurt to my bowl. I also added some ketchup, American-style mustard, some vinegar, and seasoned with salt. I mixed it well and my sauce was ready. I then toasted 2 pitas and cut them open, and oh, look at that steam, that probably hurt my hands. Anyways, I added the sauce in and spread it evenly. I then added the chicken and then topped with the tomato and onion. And of course, we can't forget about the paprika on top, so I just added that and lunch was ready.
This sauce is a success. I tried the sauce on its own and I didn't think it was gonna work, but with everything together, with the chicken, oh, you need to make it. It's so good.
Post lunch, I had my usual tea and a chocolate digestive. For dinner, I'm having some of my soup from the day before, so I'm just warming it up in a small saucepan. And I was really craving a toasty on the side, so I picked up this cheddar cheese and onion chutney to make a cheese toasty. I spread about a tablespoon of chutney on 1 slice of the bread, and then I used a vegetable peeler to add some cheddar slices. And yes, I clearly thought that wasn't enough cheese, so I'm just adding some more. I then buttered my bread and added it on my non-stick pan on medium heat. I cut it in half and ooh, look at that melty goodness. That was honestly so good and comforting for a cold evening. So I just served my soup on a little bowl and enjoyed with my cheesy toasty. Another day, and what do you know, another veggie omelette. This time I'm using some fresh peppers, so I'm just chopping it up in small pieces and then slicing a few mushrooms. I added them to my pan, seasoned with salt and pepper, and let them cook through. Meanwhile, I cracked 2 eggs and added a bit of egg whites. I whisked it well and added them to my veggies. While the omelette finishes cooking, I grabbed a couple of these crisp breads to have on the side. I then mashed about 1/3 of an avocado, seasoned with salt and pepper, and added a bit of lemon on top. I topped my crisp breads with the avocado, and then my omelette was ready to flip, so I just folded it and served it on my plate. And yes, of course, another cup of tea, because I just love it so much, I have it all day. For lunch, I picked up these cheddar rolls from the supermarket, so I'm just adding a couple to warm up in the oven. And as I was out, I also picked up a salad box from a local place, so I'm just adding everything in my bowl. It's a mixture of coleslaw, pasta salad, and veggies. I also added a bit of leftover avocado, as I thought it would go well with that. Lastly, I added my cheddar rolls, and lunch was ready. And today's post-lunch sweet treat is this super chocolatey brownie I picked up from a local bakery. And then for dinner, I was really craving pizza, so I'm making this 2-ingredient pizza dough. I just added some self-raising flour in my bowl and some Greek yogurt. I brought the mixture together with my hands and then placed it in my flour surface to open it with my rolling pin in a pizza shape. This dough is a bit sticky because of the yogurt, so I just add more flour as I open it up. I then put the pizza in my pizza pan and topped with some passata. I spread it around evenly and then added some dried basil and ground garlic. And for toppings I kept it simple, so I'm just doing some mozzarella for a classic margherita. I added the cheese and put my pizza in my preheated oven for about 15 to 20 minutes or until the dough is cooked through. I also added a few basil leaves for the last few minutes and then my pizza was ready. I hope you enjoyed this video and you got some inspiration for some yummy meals. If you did, don't forget to like this video, and if you made it this far, comment a pizza emoji down in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.